Welcome. Hello, I'm Brooks, creator of Nor and Consortium 9. This is the second in our series, Free Play, where we spend time talking about what it means to truly have play become free, freed of a lot of the things we don't even know that are restraining it. Today, I wanted to take a chance actually to sort of have a solo conversation and talk through the way that video games and games in general have a meta and what that really means, because we don't really think about the meta, in my opinion, correctly. The meta of a video game is pretty standard across the video game world. We understand it as when we start playing a game, we don't really know what to expect. After a while, we very much do. And as we do, we try to make the efficiency towards success greater. This means in Call of Duty, you picking the right gun, the right loadout, the right location to drop in Warzone. This means inside of Counter-Strike, making sure that you pick the right weapon, the right setup every single time. And there are guns that no one picks because of this. In Dota, it means that if the developers don't come out with the right heroes or the right items or the right dynamism in the map, over time, the meta of the game becomes stale. The same handful of heroes gets picked. The same 5 or 6 ways that you might do item builds for them becomes specific. And suddenly you don't see the interesting plays, the choices that you might see of having one character become a support who normally is a carry. These odd movements become restricted by metas. This is the meta of video games. Every video game has them. Every sports has them too. The idea of when you're supposed to shoot a 3-pointer or a 2-pointer in basketball, there are very specific sort of social norms around it. In baseball, when you should steal a base and when you shouldn't, when you're supposed to throw a ball, supposed to throw a strike, there are very specific expectations around very hardened metas. But we often don't talk about really the most important meta of all, and that is the way that the game itself operates in the larger space inside of our society. We don't like to think of it this way. Video games are where I go to disappear. I go to remove myself. I go and play around a Dota, or more recently, I've actually played Battlefield 2042 again, and then Dota again, because it turned out it was the same. We go to disappear. Our lives and the rest of the lives that we live socially are supposed to disappear with us. This process has commonly been called like the magic circle, this line, sort of created by Zynga, who sort of came up with the concept of homo ludens. It's been used a lot. There's a wonderful game called Magic Circle that very much talks about this. Ralph Koster has written about it quite a bit as well. This is the space and the edges of my game. When I'm playing, I'm safe inside of this. This magic circle doesn't really exist. It's more the boundaries of the rules. It's the extent to which I'm able to affect the world inside of it. If I'm playing, for example, The Sims, I'm able to click around in my screen. I'm able to affect the characters to a certain level. The magic circle is limited. We don't talk about the magic circle and how it extends into the rest of Steam, for example, or which launcher I'm using, even though that affects it. This magic circle we like to talk about as being impermeable, because we've been buying games that are supposed to be one-shots, one big magic circle that's locked in. But that's not really how it works. There's a permeability to magic circles over time that have become worse and worse and worse. And it's not specifically the microtransaction, although it's become worse than ever. Diablo recently, Diablo 4 releasing, has shown kind of the ugliest version of this, where they have cosmetics that are flatly massive purchases with a time limit. So that way they really can make sure you have that FOMO and get those people who have a little bit of reciprocation to anxiety and sort of abuse that. This is the surface version of it. Underneath it, though, when we talk about the meta, we forget that games aren't built inside of a magic circle. The world of video games is built by capital. It's built by how people make money. It's the first question anyone needs to ask if they're going to make a game. Some places of the world, you're fortunate enough not to have that. But for most of us, when we sit down and we go, I want to build a game with a few people, you have to ask how you're going to make money off of it. You're not going to give it away for free. That question comes in kind of 2 forms. As far as I'm concerned, there really aren't any others. There are really these 2. There's versions, but they're basic. The first is your game be a premium purchase? It's going to be $15, $30, $60, $70, $120 for a collector's edition. What is that going to mean? Well, the other side is then free to play. Your game's going to be free, but you're going to do microtransactions in order to pay for the cost of development, which is, despite a lot of sort of efficiencies, it suddenly gets expanded because both of those things have incredible sunk costs. If you're going to go with a premium game, you need really 6 to 10 hours of gameplay in order to justify anything more than a $15 price point. Sometimes, often even $15. There are games now like Vampire Survivors who are $2. And so you're competing with that at a $10 price point. The content you need to have, the shit in your game, needs to be so large, needs to be so massive that people will play it over and over and feel justified. Because if they don't, they will let everyone know that they don't. The other side of this is when people are going to go free to play, they know immediately the game may be free, which means they can make a much smaller, much more repetitive systems-based games. Idle games very often do this. But it doesn't end there. They have to build an infrastructure beneath that. And that infrastructure is how they sell items, who they push them to, when they push them, how they push them, what is the infrastructure for purchasing, what is the credit card company we're going to use. That building very often actually subsumes and takes over. So you end up in this place where the first question, even though really people don't ask, is, are we going to make a free-to-play game or a premium game? And with that, you immediately know the sunk costs that you have to make up by overachieving. If I come at you and I say, I have this really interesting game, you drive a car and you hit a soccer ball. That's it. We made that. It's fun. You're talking about mechanics. You're talking about a thing I could put in the real world. I think someone tried to make Rocket League in the real world, but that's it. But that's not how games work, because if it's premium or if it's free to play, all of this excess capital needs to be invested up front in order to justify that long-term play for capital. This meta is one of the problems with the games industry as we see it here at NOR. When we talk about sports, when we talk about the way traditional sports works, we talk about FIFA. I love quoting FIFA because hilariously, there's some of the most horrifying choices that they've made, but they still completely treat soccer as it needs to be. They have secured this magic circle as much as possible because we don't buy soccer from FIFA. I don't go to the FIFA store to buy soccer. I don't try to figure out which soccer platform I'm going to play on. I go out back. I play with my son. I kick the ball. We pay for a league, but you're not really paying for soccer. A league is you're paying for people to help set those things up, a referee, a field, physical space, things that we don't really have in the digital world. So the analog of sports becomes really interesting when you start talking about, well, what is the meta? Well, with us in the games industry, the meta is those two paths. And it means a lot of upfront money and a lot of ideas that get subsumed, mechanics that get built into incredibly complicated free-to-play games. I used to love, some of my favorite games have been side runners. Some of the first side runners were actually premium games, if you don't remember, Forever Runners. But grappling hook games on iPhone, super fun, good stuff. But they're all free-to-play now. And the way that they're set up is I don't get to just play. It's part of this larger now circle that I have to be part of. And the same thing on the very expensive games. If you're going to make a game, you're making huge. So these tiny mechanics that could be really interesting, that could move us forward, they get like relegated to itch.io, where only weirdos like me sit and we try to, play them for free, or we grab them for $1 and we play them for a bit, but it's not enough to justify a full game. It's not enough to justify a huge community, and it doesn't allow it to get out. The way capital operates is it ultimately comes back on everything underneath it, and it takes it over. It gives us these paths and it outlines them without asking whether or not there are other paths, even if they may yield, like what we're talking about, much more capital. FIFA per game, they just have soccer. They do just fine in terms of their game, but they don't charge for soccer. This flip, this way that capital operates, is really important for us. And so when we talk about the meta game, we're extracting all of those things that sort of get bled in, the things that unintentionally permeate that magic circle, things that we don't even think about. We remove them and we actually give them their own magic circle, because ultimately that meta game that people are playing when they're, yelling about their favorite players, they're playing fantasy football, when they're choosing their favorite team, when they're buying a jersey, when they're choosing what team to watch, because the World Cup's happening all the time. What bar are you going to go to? Are you getting up to? These are meta games. This is the meta game of soccer, football, wherever you happen to live. this play that's happening, this needs its own space. So with Nor, we take this magic circle, we harden it, and we take everything that was normally permeating it and is in every other game, and we give it its own. And this gives us a chance to create play in another kind of safe space. So they aren't having to learn to play that. It's sort of the cruel joke that we've played on the whales, the metagamers, the people who would normally be and usually are involved in the stock market or sitting on a Bloomberg terminal. This second circle, we want them to play without having to become a Twitch perfect response gamer. They don't often want that. They want this. They want to play inside of this. They want to actually play with capital, with tokens, with crypto, with the thing that actually crypto can do, which is play with speculation, give people ownership, give people a chance to have a real marketplace and play in that way. This is what we want to encourage people to be doing. This is the game around Nor, inside of which we have all of these great little fun little magic games that themselves have completely hardened magic circles, not falsely hardened like we have now in video games.